All right, you should be able to see GitHub and the OpenAPI screen now.
Yep.
Cool. So let me start over.
And you want to keep running notes in a Google Doc. Marsh this does for the marketing meeting. Does that seem like a good?
Yeah, that does actually. So let me fire something up.
Do you want me to put it together while you speak?
Yeah, that'd be cool if you could start that and then share.
And I'll share it with the whole meeting here.
I appreciate you, Emmanuel. So, all right, starting over because Ken didn't record everything. Ken Lane, I'm Chief Evangelist here at Postman. Some of you might know me as API Evangelist. And let me keep, because some of these people, you guys needed letting in, and some of them, it looks like you're just getting in automatically. So it looks like nobody's waiting. That's cool. All right. My name's Ken Lane, API Evangelist. We're coming here together to talk about OpenAPI demand generation. So really, when you look at the OpenAPI landscape, there's lots of conversations going on. I think it's pretty clear that OpenAPI is kind of the specification of choice. I think, as of yesterday, I think we're like, the 36th or 37th member? Current members. And there's obviously lots of adoption, lots going on, but what's really missing is any sort of organized effort to get the word out. See, some of y'all require admission and some of you don't, but it looks like it beeps, so that's cool. So there's really no organized, centralized effort kind of creating demand, getting the word out, helping organize what people are saying, what people are building. And because of my history and experience, this is something that I really want to focus on when it comes to my participation in the OpenAPI initiative. And so as part of the OAI, we just started talking about this as part of the marketing meeting, which is later today. And one of the first ideas that came out was, let's just start this discussion. And in my style, we wanted to come up with a bunch of ideas, and we fired up a spreadsheet and started organizing ideas. And most of these ideas are actually Steve Wilmot's, but they got my name next to him because I took what he put into the spreadsheet into here. So I would say the first 10 of these or 8 of these are Steve's. And let me zoom in a bit so we got a little bit better visual for the video. But the idea was to hold some office hours. That was the first idea. And rather than wait, I just said, let's do it. I didn't have much organized or prepared, but I just wanted to start the conversation. So I just went ahead and fired up this office hours. Thanks y'all for joining, and just get the conversation going about what we can be doing. Been gathering these ideas. A few people have been adding new ones. And then we've even had the API tooling providers chime in and start letting know they're here to support. And so today, last week I kind of just gave a kind of 100,000 foot view of what we're trying to do. Today I would like to really start diving into some of these ideas and just actually kind of read through them and give each one, a good minute or two to think about, and then open it up for questions. But before I start doing that, any comments, questions, concerns about the wider format, what we're trying to do here? I'll just kind of open it up to the floor before I keep rambling.
No. It's a great idea. Definitely great to do this. I think OAI is in a great place. We've done a lot of things, but it feels like we could do a lot more, and there's even resources available to do that. So the more we can get the word out and get people onboarded and educated in how to use it, the better. So great stuff.
Great. Yeah, every time I start digging in, there are cool things going on. For me, it's classic API evangelist stuff where I'm not doing any of the thing. I'm just shining a light on what people are doing. And there's just really some amazing storytelling, tooling. I just feel there's not any sort of central effort, and I'm hoping that's what this group can be. And I understand there are resources with the marketing budget, but I think I would like to figure out, what's that balance between OAI led, OAI funded, as well as community, coming up with a way for incentivizing folks to step up and get involved and help carry the load. And that's really hard from the OAI if you've been on the OAI, it's tough to get people to step up and contribute to the spec. But I'm hoping with this kind of word of mouth and demand generation that we can come up with little micro ways that people can contribute in their everyday activities, and then work to make sure that all member and non-member folks are up to speed on what those activities are, and so that we can all be kind of performing little micro tasks each day and throughout the week that help boost and help amplify, and then we'll be measuring and trying to understand how to repeat those. So with that said, let's spend some time just kind of looking through these, and I'll just give each one a quick read through and then pause, and we can talk about it a little bit. But then we can also take this offline and do this in an asynchronous way. That's why I did it on GitHub. I'll pause there a little bit. I created an org called OAI Demand Gen. This is going to be kind of messy, so I really didn't see it being necessary to be part of the official OAI group. At some point, if we deem otherwise, we can go there. But I created just basically a home repository. The goal here is this is the home for this effort. The README should have everything you need to get going on this. Here I just kind of gave it a quick overview. Here's our weekly office hours. GitHub issues is the primary way we're chiming in. And then I've got 2 tags. One is just, hey, this is an idea. And then one is when things are in motion. And there's a couple ideas I'm already moving forward on my own because it's work I'm doing. But if you want to be invited to this org to be part of the conversation, you don't have to be an OAI member. It's part of the reason I set up this separate org. I'm happy to open this up for people to help and jump in. So let me know. And then, as I said, we're going to be recording this, and I'll be posting each one here for folks who can't make it to this time. So with that said, let's look at some of these ideas that have been. So I'm going to click actually on the idea tab, so we're only looking at ideas here. Support for other groups joining. What's up, girl? I just got a new puppy yesterday, so you guys there might be some interruptions here. She's pretty crazy. So support for other groups joining OAI, async, and I did not spell that right, or maybe Steve didn't, but async, JSON schema, APIs JSON, and ramp up this process. So how do we make the OAI, or even this demand gen? I think we should discuss what this means, but I think it's, in the early days of Swagger, API Blueprint and RAML were kind of neck and neck there for a long time. Now, Oracle and APIs joined the OAI, and MuleSoft's on the OAI, but both are still viable formats. So I think, they should be, part of this conversation as well. But right now, I would say async and Open API and JSON schema are kind of the top dogs. So I'll pause there. What's the group's thoughts on making this a bigger umbrella? At what level should we be doing it? Should it be at the member level or the org level? What should we do? Thoughts?
No.
Well, I'm gonna give everyone like 5-10 seconds to chime in before I just keep talking. So, from my vantage point, go ahead.
Right. Well, since I originally wrote it, I guess I should say something. So, I think basically OAI is, it has the OAI specification, and obviously we have the LF structure, and that umbrella structure actually could host more activities, and there's plenty of API specifications out there that are great. And in why pay the administrative overhead multiple times, right? We could be co-promoting many of these things. And it worked very well with the Ask conference last year, where we had GraphQL, we had JSON schema, we had other folks, and it was really, really just stimulating to have.
Uh-oh, you're skipping out, Steve.
The more we can support these other specs, I think it just creates a much more stimulating environment. So things we can do there would be great.
Agreed. I would add Yes, I mean, so Steve and I are owners of API's JSON. We're more than happy to throw something, contribute it to the organization. We've already had conversation. I don't think there's a lot of concern there. We're really looking for help from the group to manage that. I would say async and JSON schema have their own paths and governance setups right now. So I think there would probably be a little bit more concern from those, like, should we join the OAI? Should we put this under the umbrella? How's it going to change our current governance model? So those are both conversations I would like to have. I've lightly had them with JSON schema. I heard that at the API days in Paris last year, there was a deeper conversation. Async, I'm having that regular conversation with Fran. So I know the point he stands right now, he's considering that. I think he's considering a CNCF. But then we had a conversation last week about how Google has started their own foundation and has pulled Angular, Istio, I think there's one other, into this new foundation that is not CNCF, which I'm still studying why that is, why Google would create their own foundation rather than joining. I don't think it's something Async wants to do, but we'll see. I'm not in the decision-making chair. I would say Async and Fran reminds me very much of Tony and Swagger in early days. It's very much a dictatorship, and but a good dictatorship that I think is moving things forward pretty rapidly. Thanks for creating this Google Doc, Manuel. Appreciate it. So any other thoughts on the specs? I really think that I think this is pretty critical. For me personally, I don't think all the specs, I don't think we should have one spec to rule them all. I mean, maybe this is just Steven and I's bias, but we think there should be ways of referencing the specs, and the specs work together. I think there should be a diverse number of specs. I've had this conversation with the SLA folks out of Seville, Spain, that are doing the SLA edition. I've had this conversation with Isabel on the security specs. And then I'm in the chair right now where I'm having to make these decisions regarding Postman specifications. So Postman.
Are you talking about specifically the demand gen aspect, or is this kind of the wider discussion of specs being affiliated under the Open API initiative?
I would say both. I would say for this group primarily, I'm talking primarily demand gen. Do we want this group to be amplifying and talking about all of the specs, or just the Open API?
Yeah, I think the example of the ASC was good, as you said, and that's worth pursuing.
Great. Yeah, I'm a big believer in the kind of outside-in influence. So I think if demand gen can start having these conversations and we can amplify them, we can grow them, we can evolve them, I think there's a way of influencing the OAI to maybe move further down that road. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would be pretty interesting. So I personally, as far as Postman's concerned, I'm going to be doing this. So as part of my demand gen kind of activities, Async API, Open API, JSON schema are kind of top of mind, and Postman collections. But I'm also working to amplify Postman environments, which are a great way to apply keys, tokens, and different things to APIs. And then I'm interested in defining other specs that help define orchestration. So how do you daisy chain? How do you orchestrate with APIs? And then testing as well. So Postman collections have scripts in them, and so I'm pursuing how do we evolve that as a formal standard, and does that stay living in Postman collections? Does it live as an OAI overlay? How do we do that? So I'm trying to answer a lot of those questions, but I'm going to be just telling stories and helping amplify all of them. So unless there's any objection to this demand group, talking about these wider specs, I'm going to slowly expand it as I lay the foundation for the Open API. I'm going to layer in async conversations. I'm going to layer in Postman and API's JSON. And I'm hoping selfishly that I can use some of this paid time for Postman on this effort to put more energy into API's JSON, because Steve and I don't always have the time that we want for that. So that's supporting other groups. Any other questions, comments, thoughts on that before I move on?
Yeah, I like the idea. I think there's a lot of opportunity for synergy across the different specifications and creating some more uniformity and being able to reference elements of different API specifications and things. So, an example of that would be uniform use of JSON schema across the different specifications. I'm very interested in developer experience and things like the API documentation. And one thing that like OpenAPI doesn't really provide is a good way within the description strings of your operations or your schemas, a clean way to reference or link to other operations or other schemas. You can certainly use, just markdown hypermedia links, but that doesn't really help you in referencing things by their name. You have to know the exact URL that something sits at. You can't use relative links and things like that. There's no known way to have anchors for each of the operations or schemas or properties, etc. So being able to integrate across different elements, whether it's referencing JSON schemas or referencing things within definitions and stuff like that, the ability to reuse and orchestrate between multiple API specifications would be really valuable.
Agreed. I think you get at the kind of the crux of it for me is one of the, I wouldn't say weaknesses. So after this at 9, I'm going to do a recurring API 1 or OpenAPI 101 half hour to just answer public questions for people trying to understand what OpenAPI is. And the second one is 9:30. I'm going to do one on migrating from Swagger to OpenAPI specifically, and I've gotten 10x the demand from that one. People asking me questions, so I think I've hit on something. But as part of that discussion, one of the main pain points is ref support and consistent. I think that's in Swagger, it's in OpenAPI, and it addresses the migration as well. And one of the this is why I like having see if I have my tabs still open. There they are. One of the things I'm parsing right now, pun intended, is GitHub's. If you go to OctoKit, so GitHub just republished their docs for the API, and it's using OpenAPI. And if you look at the latest version, they have an operations folder, which has all their operations. And then if you look at their index.json, you'll see this is just a bunch of refs to that operations folder. And it's one of the bigger, more robust APIs that fully use refs in my experience. And a lot of times I encounter tooling doesn't support refs. So I think having a wider conversation about just using references in document as part of Swagger to OpenAPI literacy and education, teaching people that they exist, what the components library is, what is reuse, what are refs, all the way to more advanced usage of them across specs, I think is a conversation I would like to be having. So I am all for multi.
Can I think also new features as they come in, for example, in 3.1, in my experience, a lot of people have questions. Okay, why did this show up here? How do I use it? What's the best use case for it, and so on?
Yep. I think so. I would like to see, as part of this group, we have a kind of a release office hours where we talk about features, whether we do it in this forum, whether we do it as a separate. That's kind of what I'm slating 2 hours Friday morning for this. The first hour is this demand gen. The second hour, I'm going to split up between a variety of half-hour sessions that are dedicated to specific topics, and those might be rolling topics. And I think answering release questions is going to be a big part of that. All right. So, yay specs, yay multi-specs. Let's have a conversation. I would say I'm going to keep this multi-spec view strictly a demand gen thing, but if we can generate conversations and generate interest, who knows what will happen from an OAI org standpoint. Next one, OAI video interviews blog. So just frequent weekly, bi-weekly video interviews, starting with members, I believe, and then going outside that and having a wider conversation. I think it's a pretty good idea. Thoughts? This is one I would definitely like to see get flagged as kind of OAI participation, OAI money being brought to the table. Oh, I see Mr. Kurt Collins. What's up, Kurt?
Hey, man.
Good to,
hey, everybody.
Good to see you, my friend. Been a while.
Good to see you, too.
So this is one that I think, as far as demand gen is concerned, we can be building lists of people who should be interviewed for these. We can be kind of queuing up, but I think we're going to need some formal resources to actually conduct those interviews, do the video editing properly, and get some sort of cadence and rhythm that is probably beyond my capacity to keep those posts up and going. So I would like to bring this up in the OAI marketing meeting. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say we need some kind of, maybe it goes here in the issue or somewhere else. We need kind of some running way to track who's nominated for this, who suggestions, or who's doing one, who's completed one, where the link is. So kind of like a registry, if you will, of these talks.
Yeah.
Maybe web, maybe a GitHub page.
Yeah.
Could do a projects page. Or I know many companies who like having like their row maps in this open Trello board. But for you in GitHub, we can probably just use projects.
I like that. So I will flesh out how to do that. So one of the things, this is kind of jumping ahead, but and it's Steve's kind of spawning out of open source testing, parsing, etc. libraries. 2 separate repos I've started because this is work that I'm doing as part of my Postman work, is who are the service providers that are using OpenAPI, and then who are the open source tooling providers. And then as I go through these, so you can look at the service provider page here, and there's a pretty long list, and Emmanuel and I are reaching out to some of these as part of Ask and getting sponsorship. But what I'm doing is reaching out to them generally and going, hey, what are you doing with OpenAPI? And then going, hey, by the way, here's how you can support OpenAPI by sponsoring Ask. So I'm opening the door with that wider conversation. But as I flesh out each one, I'm going to add it as an issue. So each company that's been contacted has been responded. I'm going to manage it with an issue. And then as I'm approaching them, so I did it on the tool side. Let me see, maybe I don't have the issues here, but tools for OpenAPI. So Fast API, I started on the list. I profiled Fast API, I found out who the founder is. I emailed him. I'm having a conversation with him right now to get an official kind of overview of how they're using OpenAPI. And then I'm going to flesh out, well, what's their immediate team. So I'm going to add, like, here's their Twitter accounts. And I'm basically profiling that company, getting their official stance, but then finding out who their key stakeholders are so that we can use them as part of this wider demand gen. And why I say this is because then those people can then be used as part of this blogging. If we do this blogging, I can say, hey, the founder of Fast API, we can add them to the list when we get that project set up. And we can start doing more work there to build those relationships. So that's all I'm saying. Why I'm saying that is, 1, I'm using other repos to manage some of these lists. 2, as I flesh out some of those people, I can add them to this list and say, here's one we might want to reach out to and ask, or here's one I've already asked and they're more than happy to participate. because as part of this demand gen, that's one of the things that I want to do is when I reach out to a company, I don't want to waste their time with a bunch of random questions. I want to have those questions ready to go. I want to have a page and go, look, here's where we can plug you in. Here's many opportunities. You let us know what you have time for. But I think that would be a great way to get really interesting people who are building things with OpenAPI, stepping up and doing blog interviews.
Yeah, Ken, in sort of that same vein of interacting with folks and sort of pulling on folks who are consumers of OpenAPI as opposed to vendors of OpenAPI, there's probably an opportunity here, even just post-interview, to start working on case studies, right? Like, so what is your story about implementing OpenAPI in your organization?
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm doing is in my Twitter tweet deck, having some columns here for OpenAPI searches, Swagger API, just general API. But I spend a lot of time looking through here, kind of just really getting to know what people are doing. And I mentioned it last week. There was a kid in here that was like, I know no one in my 100-person timeline is going to understand what I'm saying, but I just finished my first OpenAPI and it was really hard, but I got it out the door, and like I retweeted him with API Evangelist, and immediately like he felt like he was pretty showcased. And so how do we do that kind of stuff and then give that person a platform as well as the vendors? Because I think, Kevin, your point is pretty important, that people down in the trenches who aren't building tools or aren't service providers but are just applying it and making their worlds easy, we want to be highlighting and showcasing a lot of that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a big difference between what members are going to do with some of the demand gen versus what's coming from OAI specifically, right? I think it's probably on the list here: education, certification, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I think that's something that certainly each vendor could do, possibly already doing in some capacity, but might actually live better on the OAI side.
So one thing I'm going to add here is a people list, and I'm going to ask people before I add them, just so I'm not calling people out. But as part of API Evangelist, I've done a lot of stalking of y'all over the years, and I have pretty long lists of people doing interesting things with APIs. And as part of this demand gen, so I'll build a list of those, and hopefully we can be just showcasing a lot of individual people as well as brands, tools, and services.
That's great.
So I think OAI interview blogs is a great one. I think we should vote it up. Like I said, I don't think it's one, the ones that I'm setting as in motion are ones that like I know I can take the reins, I have the bandwidth for, and I can own. I don't feel like I can own that one. So I'm going to keep evangelizing it. I'm going to propose it as part of kind of my OAI marketing recommendations. Until we can find an official owner to help lead it. But I think it's one that's got to have that OAI touch, because I think there's some OAI resources there. So I think that's one I'm going to try to get Adam Duvander to help own in one of our conversations. So Adam and I have been talking about how to build a guest blogging program across the space. So he did that for the API scene with Medi, but they stopped doing it. They're still doing it, but he's not running it. But we've been talking about that wider across the space, because he works for Heavy Bits, Stoplight, and then at Postman we're building a guest blogging program. So I think that can be brought into that loop. But if you have if any of you have interest, chime in there on the GitHub issue, and as we kind of formalize it and find it an owner and set it into motion, I think jump in, let me know. More sponsorship of non-API tech events, getting the broader message to the audience. And so last week it was mentioned that some research as part of the OAI has been done on this. I'm going to try to find what that is. Getting out to JavaScript conferences, Node conferences, getting out of the API echo chamber is pretty critical. I would like to get outside of the tech echo chamber. I would like to go.
Is O'Reilly completely gone from the events?
Good question. I know it was running on live support system. I don't know what the current state is.
Because I mean, it's tech events, but they do a pretty good series of the architecture events.
Yeah, they're going just all online. So they're not going to do any physical events anymore.
But I think those are the types of partners we should be reaching out to and seeing what we can do. I would like to add to that mix, like healthcare, banking, a couple of the top industries that have API specifications, but don't necessarily aren't just pure tech dominated. One of my missions or tasks at Postman is to get us to start getting us to more decision makers and beyond just the developer community. So I'll be adding that into the mix. Anything else on non-API tech events?
I know Swift, like the banking folks, do a big annual conference on fintech, and they have a very strong interest in OpenAPI. So that's just one.
Good.
Things like GDPR and other regulations that are coming across. California's also got similar privacy type regulations. Will have some impacts on APIs across the board. I know that FDX, Financial Data Exchange Initiative, that group is working on things for consent, which would be similar to like OAuth consents, but basically granting access or consent to access your data and things like that. So there's some possible work there that I think would be good for us to be aware of.
Yeah, FDX came up in a conversation last week that I was having as far as kind of monitoring and regulatory and compliance. Like, hey, we have these APIs, they're standardized, but are they reliable and something you can actually depend on? So yeah, interesting. I may start one just on other organizations, so like FDX, and I think there's FHIR specification, so I think there's an overlap with the support for other groups joining the OAI. I think it's also other groups that we can just align with and work with that have their existing standards, and I think there's a lot that other groups like the FDX can learn from the OAI and then learn from maintaining an open API spec for their standards, and using JSON schema, because some of them are older school and don't really kind of see the future, I think, and so I think there's a lot to learn there.
I think another interesting thing to look at would be just the structure of OAI, the governance board, the technical steering committee, things like that. How effective are they? Is there opportunity to improve that? How do we get better participation in the TSC? And then other specifications, can they structure themselves similarly or adopt some of the same practices, ones that work best? Certainly, using GitHub and open contributions and things like that is really a very positive aspect of that. I think everybody's kind of following.
Interesting. So maybe like OAI being a blueprint for others. I like that. All right. So moving beyond sponsorships of non-API, 10 short PDF white papers on value of open API spec adoption. I second that. Any other thoughts? So for me, this fits into a wider suite of official materials. And I know there are other, we'll figure out the overlap with this group, but there is an EDU effort going on within the OAI to produce a getting started guide right now. So I would see this being overlapping with that, is a common set of official materials that I think explain what OpenAPI does, how you get started with it as a spec, but also some of them I would love to see specific stops along the API lifecycle be addressed. So one dedicated to docs, one dedicated to mocks, one and so I think PDF white paper that show the business value and the benefits of adopting the spec, I think is really needed, because I think this reflects one of the illnesses with Swagger and to the OpenAPI conversion is most people, when I talk, and if I speak to a group and I say, do you guys say Swagger or OpenAPI? They say Swagger. And then I ask them, what is OpenAPI or what is Swagger? They say Swagger is documentation. And Swagger is not a spec. Swagger is documentation. And so I think that's one of the core illnesses. So I think the first PDF should be, hey, 100,000 foot view, what is OpenAPI spec? What does it do? But I think one that just addresses docs and says, it is not a documentation tool. It is a spec and it is used for docs. And then tell the Swagger UI story, but then quickly tell the redoc and the other stories about how you can use the same spec to document.
Do you see this as an Adam Duvander kind of thing?
I do. I think there's an overlap between here and the EDU group as well. Just I would love to see this not just be a PDF. I would like to see a PDF. I would love to see an infographic. Whatever people digest in their business worlds to explain this. Another one similarly, I think that should just be on the marketing group, maybe an Adam thing, but I don't have it needs to be more formal than just Kin running with it. So I'm not going to take the lead on this one. I'm going to bring it up in the OAI marketing meeting. Compliance stamp. So investigate and act a lightweight but slightly more formal compliance for spec adoption is important, encouraging adoption and celebrating those who implement the new standard. See if I can find it real quick. But while I'm talking, I have so many of these repos that I've started. I need to get better at. So I've created somewhere at Apogee, who is our co-founder. See if I can find it. It is how much of the spec does Postman API, does Postman support? I'm guessing this is, no, it's not it. That's Stripes. Damn it. I'm gonna have to find it for the next one. Open API spec. No. Anyways, it is a listing of all of the elements of OpenAPI, all the objects and the common things tooling supports and does not support. But I would love, I'm gonna kind of kick this can a little bit further down the road and say, here's the common things people support. And one of the things, if one of these service providers get back to me and they want to be more involved in demand gen, one of the things I'm going to ask them is, hey, can you fill out this questionnaire that how much of the spec do you support and what do you not support? Because Postman, as it stands, this GitHub repo that I showed you with the refs, you can't import that into Postman. So, what does, I'm going to work through that with the Postman team and ask how much of it we support, how much we don't, and then try to find alignment with the roadmap. When are we going to support refs, and when are we going to support relative versus, what types of refs. So I'm going to try to move that forward as a set of questions here, and then we'll see if we can get people to answer it. I would say some sort of certification, and I think as Emmanuel put in there, the badging, GitHub badging, and starting to get more formalized about what it means and what we say when it comes to compliance, OpenAPI compliance. Thoughts, questions? All right, well, I'm going to jump in, and once I can find that repo of mine, and I'm going to start fleshing out what this compliance, what might compliance mean. So tune into that issue if you have any more thoughts. So open source testing, parsing, etc. So I kind of alluded to pretty quickly how I've started this tooling list here. I've broken down, I've harvested all the OpenAPI tooling for Swagger and for OpenAPI. I think I just probably pulled the top 250 here based upon the combination of forks, stars, and watchers, which, as we know, doesn't always mean what what we think it means, but I think it's still a good way to sort these. So I've started reaching out to these tooling providers. One of the things that I'm really working on doing is defining, well, what is the master list of these tools. So I showed this a little bit last week, and I didn't bring this part over, so I'm gonna have to dive back into my Postman wiki here, but you're not getting any secret sauce here, so don't worry about it. Oops, not partners. I want specs. So if you look at for OpenAPI, see, I've profiled all the specs in the same way. But if you look at OpenAPI, what I did is I sorted by the occurrence of this word. Let me zoom in so this is a little bit bigger. And so basically, generate is the most widely used across these repos. So they're generating something. Generator, different variances of the word, I have to work on that. But CLI, oops, come on. Documentation obviously is up there, client tooling is up there, server tooling. So what is this master list? And trying to create it and have the word variances, the vocabulary that supports it, but then start asking tools, well, which of these do you actually do or deliver, and kind of certify, hey, this tool is server code and they do it in these programming languages, or this, so that we can get more precise in how we tag and organize these. And for me, that's a pretty critical piece of this tooling conversation. Is Fran and I are doing this for the async in concert, and he believes from an async vantage point that the spec should own the core tooling. So the generator, the parser, the docs, which I don't fully agree with. I think docs is pretty essential, but I don't think the spec necessarily has to own those. But I would agree with generators, parsers, validation. I think there's a certain core set that should always be up to date with the latest spec and should be robust and enterprise grade.
There's been a lot of back and forth in the OAI on this one. Is it a core thing, and so on? Is in the charter, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I remember that conversation once when it first formed, and Tony pretty adamantly saying we only do specs, we don't do tooling, and then when we do specs, we don't let other specs in, because he wasn't interested in having APIs JSON in at that point. And so I think those are shifting, but agreed. Maybe it's something we got to work on. I don't know. Open to the conversation. So I'm going to keep creating this master list. I'm going to add this as its own repo, and then once I have the master list, so I did have several iterations of this. My blog being
so that master list has a whole bunch of structured data elements to it. What about creating an application and an API around that list? So you can search it, and then you can edit it and things like that, and publish it through an API.
I agree. So I'm going to start it as a JSON file in its own repo, and then have those variances. Like code generation. What are these core things, and then try to formalize that vocabulary, and then start associating them with the tooling and the service providers, and then. When I did the diff of this between Swagger and OpenAPI to really tell what got developed tooling wise for Swagger versus what has been developed tooling wise for OpenAPI, where's the deficiencies? There's things in Swagger that don't exist in OpenAPI, but then there's also things in OpenAPI that don't exist in Swagger land. So I think we've got to, as a group, this is one of the things I want to do around demand gen is identifying the core tooling. I'm actually going to be reaching out to these providers, as I said, and seeing not only do you want to join in the OAI and participate in this conversation, but what do you need? I really want to understand what they need from a investment. Do they need money? Do they need help? what do they need to actually make their tool, their roadmap better? And so I'll be bringing that to the table as I reach out to them. All right. So that was just kind of an offshoot of the compliance. And then moving into this testing, parsing libraries is, I see moving forward open source tooling as one vein, moving forward with service providers as one vein, and then moving forward with people doing interesting things with Open API. So I'm going to move those forward as 3 separate repos, and then I'm going to create a 4th repo that is this vocabulary or for the Open API space, and start formalizing that as a JSON file so that we can use it and apply it across these areas. So this tool is purely for gateways. This service is purely a gateway. This person specializes in design, like Arnaud from API Handyman. He's, I would assign design to him. So that's what I'm looking to build, is that those 3 lists, as well as the vocabulary and how we discuss those. So I'm probably going to assign this one to me, Steve, and just kind of move this forward. I think this is a pretty foundational aspect of what we're trying to do with demand gen. I will give a quick look into one of the things that I'm doing. See if I can pull it from the other browser. I just use Firefox for this one. Is as I'm going through these providers and kind of profiling them and what they do. Come on, spinny wheel of rainbow death. Come on. It's not responding. Good old Firefox. All right, maybe it's responding there. So this is, I set up a separate Twitter account similar to how I set up a separate GitHub. This is just purely for demand gen. It is different than the OAI because a lot of how I work with this is programmatic. And this type of stuff, man, my Firefox is not happy. But what I'm doing is when I find interesting conversations going on around the Open API, come on. All right, forget Firefox. Go away. When I find, I'm building lists by, see if I can load it in Chrome. Might help, but I'm building lists of service providers by these categories. So I have a list called documentation, and I have redoc under there. I have readme IO, and then so that I can programmatically tune into them and track them. Man, my computer is just being a dog this morning. And understand what's going on, and then I retweet things. And then if people want to, people are already starting to follow this account. Here it is. So, how do you get to their list when you're not your account? Twitter interface, view list, there it is. So anyways, I have lists for each one of these words, as I'm saying over here. I'm building lists of them, adding to the members. So documentation has README, Postman, and Swagger in there. So I'm using this to categorize the different providers. And then when I find interesting stories, I'm retweeting them out, because like Thundra did an interesting story. Once I tweet it out, I then programmatically follow them, and then add them to the category that they support, and I reach out to them and I go, hey, we see you're doing something with Open API, let's get involved, let's talk, let's get you part of demand gen. And so that's the purpose of this Twitter account. If people want to follow it and retweet these stories, awesome. I think that feeds the demand gen. I'm more looking to use this Twitter account as a programmatic hub for providers, tuning into the stories they're writing, mining them when they mention Swagger, OpenAPI, or certain keywords, and then amplifying it. And then I'm also going to track which partners, who's retweeting these stories, and kind of come up with some sort of point system for who's amplifying and who's not amplifying, and we'll see how well that works out. But that's just a quick look into that. Now, we didn't get through all of our ideas. The next week I will spend and we will go through the rest of these. Looks like we got a series of API forums would be next, and we'll kind of go through the rest of these and process them in a similar way. And then throughout the week until next Friday, I'll be doing extra work on organizing these service providers, tooling providers, and reaching out to some and getting them involved in this conversation. But primarily I'm asking them if they want to get involved in Ask right now and sponsor. That's kind of my secondary motive. So I will end it there and open it up for a conversation. What do you guys think? Any other ways we can be moving this conversation forward? What should we be doing? No? Well, I'll just keep doing the talking.
From the little bit I heard, Ken, it was pretty comprehensive.
Cool.
So, thanks for doing all the work initially.
Well, yeah. Well, hopefully, I get this, you guys. This stuff's hard. We all have jobs. It's tough to pick up and be an owner on these things. But we got to find ways that we can contribute. I think just showing up. I'm super thankful you all just show up to this conversation, listen to me talk, come here to the GitHub repo, chime in. I think asynchronously doesn't take a lot of energy. Let me know your ideas. Chime in on these existing ones. Let other service providers know. If you know people who do cool things with OpenAPI, either people or they're building services or tooling, just tell them to ping me. Go talk to Ken Lang, and I'm happy to be the hub of this. As I said, luckily I have, Postman supporting me, so, and it fits with our mission. So let's just get the conversation going. Do what you can. I understand you can't own some of these projects, but like I said, we'll move some of them into the OAI and get some official support, figure out, through the marketing vehicle and how we can fund these through the EDU and marketing. And then others, let's just move forward on our own. And I'm going to work on how to guilt, harass, and convince people to, if they're building a tool, step up, and get involved, do something.
I think it'll be easier. I know for me, anyways, it'll be easier for me to understand what I can and cannot own once we flesh out a little bit more what some of these are.
Agreed. And I think as we flesh them out, create little micro tasks. So like, hey, okay, I can own that one because it's a pretty small project. Or hey, how about I just own that little piece and I'll run that forward for a week. I feel comfortable doing that because my workload's crazy. And then another thing I want to address in this is be very conscious of is just asking too much of people, including myself, and being mindful of burnout, because y'all know I've burnt out pretty high profile about 3 times now as API evangelist, and all 3 of those times were pretty much due to me not getting paid and me drinking too much is basically. And now I have a job, and so I hope that's not a problem, and now I don't drink as heavily as I used to. So just being honest and open about that. I talked to Phil. I reached out to Phil about 2 weeks ago, and I said, hey, I want to, because he's our direct competitor at Stoplight, but he's also a dear friend. And then I know how people like to pit us together against each other. And I was like, look, I wanted to reach out to you before I started all of this and see where you want to be involved. He's like, of course I want to be involved. But he's like, I just really moved forward the whole JSON schema thing, and I'm really sick of OpenAPI. And he's all, and by the way, the world's going to hell and we have COVID-19 and the environment's going to shit. So why do we care about OpenAPI? And I was like, I cannot argue with you, my friend. So just acknowledging that not everyone's got time, not everyone's got the energy, and we'll do the best we can. So I'm going to be mindful of that, y'all, throughout this process.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to switch. There is I'm going to add it to the README because I don't think I've added it, but I've done 2 blog posts on it. There's an open calendar for this event, but also the next 2 ones that I'm doing. So I'm going to jump to a second OpenAPI 101, just basic questions on OpenAPI now. If you want to join, let me know. I'll share the Google Hangout for it. And let's keep the conversation going. I'll see y'all next week.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, thank you, Ken.
Thank you,
Thanks.
see you.
Thanks again.